Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Diana Skaya. The United States is scaling back its military presence in Eastern Europe. Now it's withdrawing around half of its troops from Romania and relocating equipment, all while keeping about 1,000 soldiers on the ground. At the same time, Latvia's parliament has voted to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention on combating violence against women, a controversial decision that sparked debate across the EU. And to help us unpack these developments, I'm now joined by Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defense College. Louis, so good to have you here with us on World Talks.
Morning, Diana. Great to be back with you.
So, Louis, from your perspective, I mean, this troop reduction, how significant is this going to be for NATO's eastern flank? I mean, what does this actually all mean for U.S. approach to NATO? And I'll ask you straight up, should Europe be surprised at all?
No, I don't think that Europe should be surprised, and I also don't think that there's anything ominous here. I mean, first of all, I would say that in a somewhat rare opposition to the current U.S. administration's decision to do this, both the top Republican lawmakers in the Senate and the chairmen of the Senate, House, and House Armed Service Committees publicly said that it was a wrong signal to send to Vladimir Putin, while President Trump is trying to pressure him to come to the table to get an actual lasting peace in Ukraine. They mentioned that they strongly opposed the decision, and they said it was concerning that Congress was also not consulted in advance of this decision. But the U.S. still has more troops deployed in Europe than it did before Russia started the second phase of their war of aggression against Ukraine in 2022. And NATO defense ministers and planners are watching closely to see if the United States is going to further downsize their presence. It's part of Secretary Hegseth's deliberate process to ensure a balanced U.S. military force posture. But also in Romania alone, between 900 and 1,000 troops are going to continue to be stationed there, while the Infantry Brigade Combat Team of the 101st Airborne goes back to Kentucky after their scheduled rotation out of Eastern Europe. So I think that allies are pretty much getting to the same page that Europe needs to do more, and the U.S. is still going to be there. I mean, the United States Army has said that this is not about leaving Europe. It's just about U.S. force posture globally.
But why the sudden change, though, in Trump's policy with this? Particularly, I mean, Russia's attacks on Ukraine, if I have to put in this context, are not definitely not diminishing. Why the sudden significant change, if that has anything to do with it?
Well, I mean, adjustments to U.S. troop deployments are not unusual. And why now and why in Romania, that remains to be seen. But in Poland, I mean, Trump said just in September that Washington would likely increase its troop presence in Poland.
Right.
And the Romanians did not seem to be publicly concerned about this, because the defense minister of Romania said that the country's ties with the U.S. remain very strong and that the permanent allied presence was very considerable. If we had NATO troops, not just the U.S. soldiers, but NATO troops, it's 3,500. And the defense minister said that it was enough for Romania's needs, and that the expectation of having an entire foreign army here to defend us is quote unquote unrealistic, and that they would continue to invest in the Romanian army. And I understand that a lot of it's with messaging. I think that the Senate and House Armed Service Committees chairman, when they both said this, that the timing was perhaps unfortunate due to the message that it would send. But I don't think that the U.S. is going to withdraw from Europe either, because, as I mentioned, there are still a lot of troops that are remaining in Romania, likely more to come to Poland. So it is just about where the U.S. will go. And then also NATO can start to plan when they know which concrete numbers of American troops are going to be, where they can use other allied countries to fill those gaps.
Because, I mean, Congress members warned, right, that even limited troop reductions could actually undermine pressure on Russia, Louis.
Yeah, and I mean, when it's going on right now, I mean, the U.S. military did say that their decision not to replace those troops that are departing Romania was not, and they stressed that it was not an American withdrawal for Europe or a signal of lessened commitment to NATO. So I think the good takeaway from this is that allied countries are starting to think about how to fill the gaps there and work with the United States as an alliance, and that is not bad. And I think that using that messaging and really highlighting what other countries are capable of doing, for example, like Canada being the forward land forces framework nation, and Latvia scaling up to the brigade level, for example. Spain and Slovakia, for example, they're the framework nation there for the FLF forces, and then with the United States, I think that we're going to likely see more pressure on Putin from the Trump administration, like the canceling of the meeting in Budapest, for example. I think that the administration is getting on its last legs in frustration with Putin trying to stall the process.
And overall, though, Louis, how do you assess? I mean, I know that you're from what I'm getting is you're saying that it's not really going to be such a negative impact. But how do you assess the potential, actually, geopolitical risks of the fact of this troop reduction? I mean, you did mention there, for allies being more. Sorry, Louis, you did mention for allies being more ready. But are they really going to be ready to fill in any potential security gaps, if I may say?
Well, that's going to take time, and time is something that we need, but we don't have. We're always working against the clock collectively, and NATO allies are meeting President Trump's call to take primary responsibility for the conventional defense of Europe. And I'll stress again that the force posture adjustment the U.S. force posture adjustment will not drastically change the security environment in Europe, but those U.S. troops will be pulled from an air base on the Black Sea, which is just across from Crimea, which is unfortunately under de facto Russian control. So the optics on that are one thing. I believe that the United States wants to pivot across the globe. They want to focus more on Asia, but right now they are going to focus on Europe. And I just don't believe that there's going to be a massive scale down. The numbers are rather small. But, for example, the defense minister of Romania also said that they've received an advanced air defense system from Washington. And they have also seen a lot of Russian drones violate their airspace more than 20 times over the last 2 years, and mines floating in the Black Sea. So I think that there's going to be a lot of shift on this. But I also noticed, because you asked about capabilities, I think that people are starting to talk in diplomatic and policy circles that, hey, this started during the Obama presidency, actually, where the U.S. was starting to become concerned about great power competition with China. And so Europe needs to do more to guarantee its own defense. And I think what people should be watching is how China and Russia may act together to try and violate more territory of NATO and of Taiwan, which some people think is on the table, some people think it's off the table, but in a couple of years, we have to really watch about where their force buildups, what those look like. And so I think now is the time to act, and we start to see the early signs of that, and those are continuing. And multilateral diplomacy amongst European allies is also something that's going in the right direction, very much so.
It's very well said, Louis. But let's shift gears for a moment. I'll take it to Latvia. So now Latvia's parliament voted to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention. So Latvia could actually become the first EU country to pull out of the convention. Now, for our viewers who don't know, it's an international treaty that's meant to protect women and victims of domestic violence. Louis, why did they do it?
Well, there's going to be an election next October, so in like a day and a couple of weeks short of the calendar year, unless there's another one early. That's when the next one is scheduled. So I think a lot of this was posturing, because only one party from the three-party governing coalition, together with the prime minister, but not the party of the prime minister. It is the party of the Speaker of the Saima, though. They were promoting this, and this came, it came into force in Latvia last year, but it was a 2011 treaty, and so there was an intense debate for, I don't know, 13, 14 hours or something. And as you mentioned, that would make Latvia the first EU member state to quit this convention that was ratified just a year ago. But we'll see what happens, because the Latvian president, Edgars Rinkēvičs, must sign the motion. And he's indicated, as has the prime minister, that they are not in favor of this. And there's been some hints that the president might actually not subvert a parliamentary decision, but the vote didn't win a 2/3 majority, so the president could return the bill to the Latvian Saima for another reading if he has objections. And, that might call a snap election, and we'll see what happens, but it's very unlikely that if it were to go back to the Saima, that those who voted would vote in a different way. But there are a lot of protests, as I see from the screen, in Riga about this.
Exactly. I was just about to ask you that. My next question, exactly like you mentioned there, what we saw. I mean, numbers I have here from one of our reporters is about around 5,000 protesters, if not more. Maybe you can fill us in more on that, Louis. But I mean, how strong is the public opposition to this decision?
I think it's pretty strong, because another thing is that a third party in the coalition, so there's three parties in the coalition. There's Jauna Vienotība, Progressiva, and ZZS, the Greens and Farmers. And one member of the coalition from the Progressive Party, or Progressiva, said that that party wouldn't rule out appealing to the Constitutional Court. And I think that the political gamble for those who are pro pulling out of the convention is that it does seem to be that there's a lot of opposition to this in ways that, these types of protests are not very common in Latvia, like they are in certain other EU countries. So this indicates actually an amplified number of people who are against this. And I also think that now that that's been decided, and people are understanding that, okay, this would be the first EU country to pull out, it might be a challenge if it goes back to a second reading. The prime minister also joined the protesters outside of parliament and mentioned that they're not going to give up, and they're going to continue to try and make sure that this doesn't happen. So we'll see if it goes to a second reading, but I also think that that might be one enticement for those who are against this to try and have that, because then there might be more political pressure on the opposition parties and the one coalition party that was for this to reverse course, even though I don't think it will be likely that they will.
Thank you so much, Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defense College, for being with us here as a guest on World Talks. And that's all for this edition of World Talks. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.